Alrighty, folks, welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalwarowsky, and Susan's unable to be with us today. However, we have a special guest. And right before we get to our special guest, we always have to start off with a quote on this show. And I have one here, and I know, Ryan, you've probably heard this one before, but I've had this one here from Guillaume Apollinaire, and he says, now and then, it's good to pause in our pursuit of happiness and just be happy. And with that, we have our special guest, the host of the Pursuit of Happiness podcast, Ryan McGuire, is with us. Ryan, how are you?
Thanks for having me. That's a great quote. That is a great quote. I know that's something I fail to do often. I'm always looking for what's next in the pursuit instead of like taking a moment just to self-reflect and just to be happy with how far I've come. So I know that's something a lot of us can work on. Great way to start the show.
Absolutely. And thank you. And thanks for joining us, obviously. And for folks out there who are maybe a little bit new to you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm the host of the Pursuit of Happiness podcast. It's been 3.5 years now, approaching 4, which is insane. What a journey it's been, starting off as somebody that had no idea how to start a podcast, but loved listening to them. Made a lot of mistakes early on, but it's been one of the greatest journeys. And sometimes I do take a moment to reflect on 150 plus episodes now, which is quite an accomplishment. Having amazing guests such as you on there, great connections, talking with super smart people, and taking a bit from every conversation that I learned from. All these people give just nuggets and pieces of information that help me along my pursuit and help my listeners along their pursuit, dealing with all different avenues. Because, let's be real, happiness isn't a straight line. It comes from health, it comes from fitness, it comes from mental health, it comes from traveling, experiences, just so much more. I cover all these topics. It's been quite the journey, and I can't wait to keep going.
Absolutely. And so obviously for folks listening, if you're listening to LOP, wherever you're listening to this show, just Google Pursuit of Happiness. It's everywhere, just like we are. And soon you'll be hearing my episode on the Pursuit of Happiness, where we do a little bit deep.
Great episode.
What we do here.
That's what I do too. You got to get the real raw truth. You want to make it relatable. People will be able to tell when you just stick to the surface level stuff, and it's one of the reasons I started the podcast was so I can dive deeper and ask the questions I really want to know that's going to affect me in my life. And I can apply these things to my life. It's one thing if you tell me that, hey, I eat healthy every day, right? It's another thing to say, this is what I eat. This is how much I eat. This is why I eat it. I love the fine details, and that's the stuff that you can take and apply to your life.
So tell me, Ryan, like you mentioned it a little bit, but like what led you to starting that show?
Yeah, that's a great question. Appreciate the question. So the raw and honest truth, because you just said that's what you do on this, was first and foremost, it was 2020. It was the beginning of 2020. And when everything started to shut down, we did not know what life was going to look like. And it was scary. It was isolate. At the time, I was very much single, and not just single, but it was like, how in the world do you date in a time like this where people aren't even like allowed to stand next to each other? And I'm in my late 30s, having a hard time comparing my life to everybody else that looks like they have it going on for them. And not to mention, one of the hardest things I have had to deal with, that I'm still currently am dealing with, it was when my parents got divorced. It is slightly a messy situation. I got pulled in the middle of it, and we have one parent pulling me in one direction, the other one pulling me in the other direction. And it put a lot of weight on my shoulders. And this was something that it was hard to deal with, on top of like with COVID, not knowing about the job situation, what the world's going to look like. And you know what? I had the idea I just finally need to start my podcast, and I'm going to call it The Pursuit of Happiness, because I need to talk to people who are happier than where I am at currently. And that can give me some direction and instruction and some guidance on how to chase my happiness and be happier and have a better perspective on life. And I said to myself, you know what? I cannot be the only one that feels this way. This is a platform. These are conversations I know can help more than just me. So that's what led to the start of The Pursuit of Happiness. No looking back now. Like I said, it's been quite the adventure, and my perspective has completely changed in the last few years. Mission accomplished as far as that goes, but not mission accomplished as far as continuing to pursue and continuing to help others that listen to the podcast.
It's amazing. And your life has also transformed. Like you got
Yes.
married, you're having a kid.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that and like how, like what are the things that you've learned that have led you to starting a family?
Yeah, go figure. I found my wife by way of the podcast. Who would have
Really?
thought? Yes. Interesting quick story, a little quick tidbit. Probably episode 10 or 11, I had one of my best friends on there who was setting up his dating profile. We do dating relationships occasionally on the episode. And he had never done it before. I said, well, this is something in my wheelhouse. I've done this before. Let's talk about the do's and don'ts. Let's help other people that are looking to set up a profile, how to online date. And so we did that. And at the end of the episode, I said, all right, if you're going to do this, I will do this with you. And we can come back in a couple of months and we'll do a recap of how our online dating experience was. A week later, I found my wife, Kristen, online, and it was done. Case closed. It was over. I could not believe, like, I knew it. I knew it, like, as soon as we connected, I knew immediately. I was like, this one's special. This one's different than all the rest. So because of a conversation I had in my podcast, it led me to the courage of signing up again, meeting somebody during COVID. We had to wear masks during our first date, go figure. And it's amazing just what like trying something new or just saying yes or just trying new opportunities will do for you and your life and your happiness. And I never would have met my wife if I didn't do that. And I'm so grateful. And like you said, now I'm married and now we are expecting a son in less than 2 months. Wow. Life has completely changed. I have found my pursuit of happiness. I couldn't be any happier.
I love that. And it's such an incredible story. And something I just want to echo here for folks out there is like, and you know this, Ryan, like we're roughly about 150 episodes as well. And we started it right at just like you did, right at the beginning of 2020. And we did it because of this element of like the leaders were stressed and like folks were becoming, work was becoming remote. And we saw a lot of this uptick in like bad boss behaviors. And we wanted to help those leaders work with that disruption and get better. And maybe what I would love to hear more about from you is like, what mission are you on with the show and how has that evolved over time?
Yeah. I want to make sure. Can you hear me a little better now? Perhaps my audio was a little soft.
I got you.
Terrible for a podcast, right? No, I'm sorry. Can you say your question one more time? I just want to make sure I grasp that.
Yeah. How has your mission with the show changed over time and what mission are you on today?
Yeah, that's a great question. The mission has definitely changed a little bit. I try occasionally to go back to my roots of like why I started this. Sometimes I get off into the weeds and have some really interesting conversations. But the mission has changed, or I should say evolved, as my life has evolved, honestly. As I am learning to be a husband, I've dove more into topics such as that, is sustaining a really good, respectful relationship, how to maintain that and how to be happy in that. I've done an episode now, and I'm going to do future ones on being a good parent. I've dove super deep now into therapy. I've had issues in my personal life, like setting boundaries. And I've just dove deeper into topics that I wasn't even thinking about 3-4 years ago, that play such a huge role in happiness and how to achieve happiness. And the thing I love about the longevity of a podcast, if you stick with it, as you know, is it allows you to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and not just feel like you get the surface level conversations just to try to cover a topic. I've covered most topics now. I want to go deeper. And, the one we did just most recently with the ketamine treatment was something that I didn't really know much about psychedelics a few years ago. You hear the term, some people think it's a little kooky, it's a little weird, it's more drug related, if you will. Whole new perspective on that, thanks to conversations with you and Sunny and friends in my life. And I have a completely new respect for so many topics and areas such as psychedelics and ketamine treatment and what that can do for people. It's been an eye-opening experience for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Like you say that I also didn't have that understanding or respect for what it was in 2021, and then I felt
Mm,
like I had no other option than to try this. And so that was what led me to that path, and then now obviously it's completely changed my life, and that's why we talk about it on this show. And then this year, we're going to be doing a lot more for our folks on connecting them. And we're doing some programs with some incredible folks like Sunny um, to bring that
great.
medicine to leaders. And I guess, Ryan, where I'd like to go is, you know, you focused a lot, like, of course it's about happiness, and I think a
Mhm.
lot of leaders out there, like, we're very much, and we've talked about this a lot the last few weeks with our guests, is like they're on this hamster wheel, they're always running, they're, I wouldn't say they're very happy, but it's like very much more stressed. Like,
Yeah.
can you share us some of your wisdom on happiness, and where should our leaders start when they're trying to get more happy versus just keeping working?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, happiness is very fleeting. It's it's different for everybody. I compare it to success a lot. Success and happiness are are just they're very different for everybody what that actually looks like. And I think it's a tricky scenario achieving happiness. I think people are happy generally, but I think if you don't have the proper mindset, you're always going to be chasing it and just worried about more about the chase than, as you said in the beginning with your quote, just taking a moment to realize everything you have and everything to be happy about. Um, as far as leadership goes, I've gone back and forth in this a lot. I've been in leadership positions. I've also been in positions not in leadership. Um, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And I think that is one of the most important things to note is that everybody is an individual. Um, so I think a great place to start for any leader is just open communication, being transparent, realizing the person you're communicating to is also human. And everybody comes with their different backstory. Everybody reacts to different situations differently. It's finding how to communicate, lead, and work with that person as an individual and find a way for them to contribute if you're working as part of a team to work as a team together. Um, Leadership is not easy. It's something that's a continuous skill. You got to keep working at it. I don't necessarily envy those people that are in management positions. It's hard. It's hard. I've done it before. It is difficult. It's a job in itself. It really is. I have a completely different respect for that now. But I think for me personally, realizing I'm a human, being somewhat empathetic of, not just between 9 to 5, but understanding there is a life outside of those boundaries. You don't need to necessarily understand all of it, but just have an understanding I'm human too. Being transparent, communicate to me like I'm a person, and figuring out the best way to work together. It's a two-way street. So I know, like I said, leadership it's a tough role, but it's different for everybody. But I hope what I said makes a little bit of sense for some people out there.
Yeah, totally. And Ryan, there's something just like I want to echo, right? Is this, there's a lot of people out there that they have this pursuit of happiness and they're trying to achieve happiness.
Yeah.
And you said it, it's like, it's not necessarily this pinnacle moment, right? And if it is, it's like very fleeting, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like, it's more of a way of being. And that has gratitude, it has love, it has appreciation, it has fulfillment. It has these elements that are more stable and longer lasting. Like, do you want to
Yeah.
tell us, like, what's your opinion on that? Like, how do folks go from like, oh, happiness is something I need to, work towards, to I can choose happiness and it's a way of being?
Yeah. I mean, listen, happiness, I think, really comes down to mindset and perspective. I think that's one of the most important things I've learned over these last few years is all the way you look at things. Um, if I could teach anybody anything, it would be to have more of a positive outlook on life, have a positive perspective, try to see things as half full instead of half empty, because you will never find happiness if you find the faults in everything, because nothing is perfect. Nobody's perfect. No situation's hardly ever perfect. Having just a positive mindset and seeing things brighter perhaps than what they really are sometimes will go a long way in life. You will be a happier person. You will emit positive energy. You will bring positive people around you, and you are the people that are around you, right? So that would be the most important thing I could relay is work on your mindset, see things from more of a positive light, try to find the highlights instead of nitpicking every detail, every negative. We are wired to be negative people. It's super easy. So it's a consistent practice, consistent struggle. And there's a lot of negative people probably around you in your life, whether it's your family or friends or coworkers consistently bringing you down. It is not easy. I deal with this all the time. As I mentioned, being kind of tied down with the whole family situation, the family struggles, it is very easy to get caught up in that. And then part of the gossip and everything. It's just like, stay above that, keep your head up, keep positive mindset, keep a positive perspective. It is amazing the things that you will see that you didn't see before. You think you see the world in color now. Just wait till you start seeing things with a positive mindset and bring a positive energy to the situation. Um, it changes everything. You can find happiness in everything if you look at it with the right perspective.
I love that. And Ryan, the one other thing I just want to mention, right, is you were talking early in the show about your ability to activate this growth mindset around learning and developing and even just like changing your perspective. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk about that? Like, how did you go from, you know, more like, I guess maybe set in your ways to like having this expanded perspective that you do now?
Yeah. I grew up, that's for sure. I grew up. I think I checked my ego at the door probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, something like that. Um, I think it was a lot of self reflection. And I'm really proud of that because I think I hit my 30s. I was single. My career was okay. I had a lot of things to be happy about, but I did focus a lot of the negative that I don't have. It was a really crummy way to live, honestly. Thinking perhaps I wasn't good enough, having consistent imposter syndrome, looking at things from a negative perspective and everything I don't have, complaining. It has a lot of stuff that runs in my family, so it felt comfortable to me.
Mhm.
And it got to the point I remember in 2015, and I'll always remember this. 15 is my lucky number. And so I said, 2015 is going to be the year that I say yes to everything that comes my way. And let's just see where it goes. And that was the best decision I could have ever made. I think we talked about saying yes to too many things, but the opportunities that come your way when you just say yes to the simplest things, or even sometimes the extravagant things or the big things, you never know where that's going to take you. And then you get an itch for more. You can't wait to say yes again because last time you met so and so, or you got to experience so and so, or you got to travel to, Europe. Or it's amazing what saying yes will do. It gives you the itch for more. And I blended that with my always curiosity, just curious mind. And it just led for just a great podcast. I love to ask questions. I've always loved to learn, which is be seen as a pro or con. I'm always asking questions to people. It can be a little annoying at times. But my yearning for knowing more, learning more, wanted to apply it myself. I think just to wrap this question up, I think people have to look inside, see what they are in reality, be honest, have an honest conversation with themselves, and find ways that they can be better. Nobody's perfect. Like David Goggins has an accountability mirror. I see you smiling. I love David Goggins. If you have some honest, hard truth conversations with yourself, you can address those problems, and then you can start moving forward. And always be curious too. Always be curious.
You mentioned like applying tools and practices. Like, what are some of the tools and practices you use?
Yeah, it's definitely mindset is something that I have to consistently work on. Knowing that everybody is going to like me and being okay with that is definitely something I've had to get used to. I try to be the likable person for everybody. Not going to happen. I think one of the most important things for anybody to know, this is something I'm going to teach my son as soon as I can. Comparison is the thief of joy. Stop comparing your life to everybody else and anybody else. It doesn't matter what anybody else has or doesn't have, or it doesn't matter that their social media post shows them in some luxurious, like your background in Costa Rica, right? I could be sitting here jealous. I'm not in Costa Rica with a beautiful background behind me, but I'm happy with where I'm at. I'm content where I'm at. Don't compare your life and what you have to other people and try to catch up to them. It's a losing battle every time. And I think something else that's really important, I'm sure you mentioned this numerous times, is consistency. The ability to show up, especially when you don't feel like showing up. I learned how to do that over the years. And that's a skill that as a practice, you have to just keep pushing. There's so many times, one, you don't feel like getting out of bed. Two, I worked for 10 hours. I'm exhausted. I told myself I'd do a workout, but I don't really feel like doing this anymore. You can easily flip the TV on and go sit on the couch, right? But to push yourself and say, nope, I made a promise to myself. I'm going to keep that promise. I'm going to be consistent to prove to yourself you can do that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It becomes a habit. And there is nothing like showing up for yourself and the confidence that builds in who you are. You're going to turn yourself into a completely different person when you apply that practice.
I love that. It's funny, right? Is like with all our leaders, we start with our relationship with self, which is basically building trust, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then the other side of it is where you went earlier in the show, is about boundary setting.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's totally saying yes if the things are in alignment with where you want to go, right?
Very
And
much.
that's often especially with folks who have crazy calendars and big teams. You have to say no, because otherwise you're going to just spend your whole day in meetings and you won't actually get a lot of what you need to do done.
Absolutely. Just to touch on that, there is power in no. That is a skill that I would say is probably down in my toolbox right now that I need to consistently work on, because as I mentioned, I like to try to make everybody happy. I want to come through for everybody. A lot of time that puts too much weight on my shoulders, whether it's work related, which is often the case. Whether it's real life, I made promises to too many people and it's important for me to keep them. So is learning how to say no. There is power in no. And if someone has a problem with that, it's kind of like setting boundaries for yourself and how to deal with that and how they can deal with that. That is something I need to get better at for sure. Mhm.
So how have you been working on it, or how has that learning process been?
It's a roller coaster. It's absolutely a roller coaster. Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough for me because, um, like I said, I want to be able to come through for everybody. When I make a promise, when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And so when someone asks me for help, my initial reaction is almost always yes. So for me to come back and say, I can't do this, it's not in my DNA. So it's something that I do have to work on. I do struggle with. I had the hardest time doing this with my family.
Yeah.
There's going to be situations that are coming up where it's now my wife and my child, and we're not going to be able to make every scenario or situation or party or occasion. Or, just to be honest here, there's a scenario coming up where we're going to have our child and our house is going to be full. And I know family is going to be coming from out of town saying, like, can we stay with you? Well, the answer is now going to be no. And this is a conversation. Literally, I've practiced in my head. How do I say no? Because I'm going to have to say no. We can work on a different scenario. And so it's the people sometimes closest to you that give you the hardest time, and there's the hardest weight to their responses, and their disappointment weighs on me a lot personally. I care what people think, especially my family. It's a consistent struggle for sure. And this is something I'll be practicing a lot more, especially now that I'm married, especially now that I'm going to have a son. Those are my priorities, and other things are going to have to take a back seat. And, I'm someone who has a lot of passions. There's a lot of things that go on in my pursuit of happiness, and I'm going to have to sift through those priorities, figure that out. And I'm going to have to start saying no, which in turn, I do believe will get me down the pursuit of happiness even further when I don't feel like there's so much of a weight on my shoulder, carrying a burden, always need to be there for other people. It's more so being there for myself and the people that are closest to me.
Totally. And this is incredibly relatable, right?
Mm.
And the one thing I would say, and obviously we can work on it one-on-one, but maybe it's reframing the no from a no to a yes to your wife and your son and you.
Yeah. Great
And that's
point.
often like it's the standard hallmark thing, which is like boundaries are saying yes to yourself, right? That doesn't really help you, to be honest. And actually, where I would go is more like the parts work around it.
Mm.
But even just thinking about it, it's like you're thinking about their disappointment on you when it's like, no, I'm making a choice to value my son and my wife because they're the most important. And that just naturally means that somebody else is lower on the list.
Yeah, I mean, that also comes down to perspective, right? Like I was saying, it's like the perspective of letting someone else down, or you can have the perspective of raising my wife and my child up. So, I mean, that's just a great point on that as well.
Yeah, and it's hard work. Like
Mm.
I have a similar tendency, and I know most of the folks listening do as well. And so it's like it's always constant work. And the other thing I just want to mention just here is when I talked to my therapist about this, she said that she likes to have sort of an 80-20 rule on boundaries. So
Mm.
there's an 80% rule, which is like, I don't know, like I'm going to take a lunch break from 12 to 1, right? And it's like, yeah, of course, if, the CEO or like the president or someone calls, like, yeah, you can schedule them in at lunch. But like most folks are going to be like, no, I'm out, right?
Right.
And then there's the 100% rule, which is like, oh, if it's more than 2 days in a week, this is unacceptable. right? And of
Mm.
course, it's going to depend on whatever situation and the boundaries you're setting. But she definitely was coaching me in that way, was like, and for her, it's sort of like, um, she works Saturdays for her clients because sometimes, of course, they have to be off work to see her. And so she was like, well, 80% of the time I work Saturdays, but then I take Friday off. Um, but then there are occasions where I will do a Friday because whatever, but I make sure that I don't work all 6 days in a week.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great rule of thumb, which kind of reminds me of a job that I had not too long ago, and kind of dive more back into leaders. So I think setting boundaries is important, but also as a leader to understand those boundaries and respect them. And when you don't respect them, or if there is a fire drill, it happens, right? Things are due. Hey, such and such popped up. Perhaps just lead in with, "Hey, I know this is a one-off. I really appreciate what you're doing here, but we need a little bit of help." I think appreciation goes a long way. I had a job about a year ago. Was probably the most unhappy I was ever at a job. Had a really hard time setting boundaries,
Mm.
and not only that, when I did set the boundaries, they were completely disregarded. There was no value. There was no respect for personal time. Mental health was dragging big time. It's a real thing, people. For the people that don't think mental health is that important, boy, oh boy, it was just weighing on me in every area of life. And what made it worse was I'm on the East Coast and I had management on the West Coast. So I would get meetings randomly 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, requests that are coming in overnight. Hey, we need this ASAP. Everything was due ASAP. So as much as I try to set those boundaries, turn off the computer, not respond to messages, it was almost seen as part of the job, which is not what I was sold on. So as much as setting boundaries is important, I think that's important for every employee or just every person in general. It's also as important as a leader to have conversations with those employees or those people that you lead on those boundaries, how to properly respect them, and understanding that there's going to be areas and times that they are crossed and it's okay. That's not going to be the norm. It's going to be the exception.
Absolutely. And for leaders also, it's setting your expectation to your folks explicitly. And so I have a tendency to work weekends. And so if I send an email to my folks, basically I don't send Slack on the weekend.
Hmm.
Um, I only send emails and then I always put in big brackets and it's like, wait till Monday.
Well, the hard part is when you start a new, let's just say, job in this scenario, you want to put your best foot forward. Yeah, I got this. And yeah, I'll show up at 8 o'clock at night and deliver you what you need because you want to prove yourself. Well, the problem is too, is also like you're also showing them that you're willing and can stay late. You're going to put yourself in like perhaps bad positions. And when you're like your wife or your kids are calling for you, but you're like, now I showed them I'm willing to work late. And now that's their expectation and stuff. So I think setting boundaries and setting expectations will go a very long way. But it's tough. It's tough once you dig yourself kind of in that hole a little bit of proving and providing on the weekends, late at night. Sometimes it starts to get expected from others, and that's hard to dig yourself out of for sure.
It is, and it's funny, right? Is like I coach some leaders that have global teams. So just like
Mm,
your job, except for they have folks all the way from like India to San Francisco.
mm.
And so they could literally work 24 hours straight and always have someone on their team that's awake and working.
Well, culture plays a huge role in that too. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine just a few weeks ago. He's got a team over in Japan, and the leadership was bragging about having his team work 29 straight hours. And my buddy is management of them was like, that is unacceptable. That is not okay. But they see it as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting too when you start blending in different parts of the world and different cultures and how they view work and how they view mental health and work-life balance. And that definitely becomes pretty tricky when it's part of who they are.
Yeah. And that's why Japan had me to talk about bad bosses and power harassment and the mental health impacts that that can have, because it's not a conversation that they have very often, but
Mm,
it is a huge problem. Is just as you mentioned, is they have a very much an overwork culture, and they have a very much a stuff it down culture.
yeah,
And so they don't speak about these things, they don't emote, and then, they have a big suicide problem because of a lot of this. And
it's
so,
real.
yeah.
It's real.
But moving back on our journey, Ryan, I want to ask you, like, what are some of the top takeaways that you've had over your time hosting the pod?
Top takeaways. Yeah, I'm glad you asked
I'm sure
this.
you have like 100, but
I have a lot. And the cool thing is for people listening to this at some point in the future, you're going to hear an episode of me talk to my son and tell him all the things that I've learned and what I think would make him a happier person. Granted, he won't be able to understand this for years and years. But it's important for me to do that and get that out. And I think a lot of people will relate. I'm also toying with the possible idea of writing a book of everything that I've learned, the collection of what makes people happy. And a few of those top things that I've taken away, and I will notice consistencies when I interview so many people. It's hard not to, right? Um, I'll give you three of them. Take away these little nuggets. The first one, a consistent theme, is people take a chance on themselves. Um, I can't You just can't understate how important that is for people that are just not feeling great. They're depressed or they just have this inkling, I'm not doing what I should be doing. And they're scared to leave because it's comfortable. It's all they know. They perhaps have a skill set in a certain area, but they're not happy. They hate their job. They don't like what they do. They hate their boss or the people they work with. The amount of conversations I've had with people that just took a leap of faith on themselves, knowing it has to be better somewhere else. They've all landed on their feet. They all have landed on their feet. Granted, there are different levels of preparation. Some people just often quit and move to halfway across the world one day. That's probably not in my bones. I'm probably not doing that. Some people prepare for months, perhaps even a year, to change the situation that they're in. But so many people just took a chance on themselves and say that there has to be a better way. And guess what? There is. And they figured it out. You have to trust yourself. You know you will figure it out. If you know there is something out there that's going to make you happier than where you are now, find a way to get there. At some point, you're going to have to take a jump. Everything that I'm gathering is that it's very well worth it. Another one I want to state is, I said this before, stop comparing your life to other people. It really is the thief of joy. It's amazing how many people are depressed or unhappy because they keep looking at social media and these highlight reels of other people that just aren't real life. You have no idea what these people are dealing with behind the scenes that are being captured. They aren't going to post this, right? They're not going to post the vast majority of their life. I'm not going to have an argument with my wife and take a picture of us sad and post it.
Some people do in a weird way.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know what's up with that, but the vast majority obviously just posting the highlights, pretending everything is great. And there are people that are just really happy with who they are. That's awesome, right? But everybody is dealing or has dealt with something. You are not alone. I can promise you that. you can promise that, right? With your own experience. Everybody, no matter how happy they look or seem or carry themselves, is overcoming something or has overcome something. Everybody has their own issues. You are not special. They are not special. I promise you that. So stop comparing your lives to everybody. Everybody has their own problems. Just because you see it doesn't mean it's not there. Um, I also wrote something else down. We also consistency is a really big one. Um, I think one that's really important that I want to reiterate: failure doesn't mean what you think it means. Failure is more of a nudge in the right direction. This is something that I want to relay to my son more than anything is if you fall off your bike, or if you fail a test, or if you strike out in an at-bat, it's just a clue. It's a key. It's a direction for next time you try, perhaps how to succeed next time or get closer to what you want to achieve. When you start seeing failure as I suck, that didn't come out the way I wanted to, I can't do this. This isn't for me. I mean, granted, there are times where quitting can be a positive. If you've given everything your all, saying no or quitting and walking away can be a positive. But overall, the people who are happy don't see failure as a negative. They see it as a nudge or a point in a different direction to get to where they want to go. That is something I'm trying to apply to my life consistently is, if I screw up at work, if I submit the wrong thing, or if I say the wrong thing, or if I have an argument with my wife, well, guess what? Now I'm going to use it as a learning experience so that doesn't happen again. And the next time it'll be better. The next outcome will be better. It's going to be closer to what I wanted in the first place. You just can't see it as a negative. You have to see it as a push in the right direction.
So much great intel there, Ryan. Incredible.
Thank you.
We got to ask you the big question here
Yeah.
is, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. Legacy is a word I have not thought of much, but as I'm getting older, I should probably start thinking about that. There's different legacies for different people. And first and foremost, I want to be known as a great husband and a great dad. That is going to mean more to me than anything, any label anybody could ever put on me. Is I want to leave this earth knowing that I was the best husband I could be. I was the best dad I can be. I want my son to be a better version of myself and then some, be his own version, I should say. But I want my son to succeed whatever I've done. Just go beyond. I want to just help build those building blocks. As far as my podcast, I think one of the coolest things, and you probably thought about this too, is when you do a podcast and you release it, it is out there forever. God knows what it's going to look like in 100, 200 years if audio files are even a thing, or who knows what that even sounds like. But wow, what a crazy concept to think about. In 50 years, 100 years, people will still listen to your podcast and you're still making an impact. I kind of want to, there's a couple ways I want to look at that is I want my episodes and I want my solo episodes and my interviews to leave people thinking. I want people to be able to take away and apply certain things in that conversation and interview to their lives. I also want people to see that I was just some random guy who was having confidence issues, stuck in a really bad position with family and relationships, was single for what I thought was way too long and I couldn't understand why. Turned this into such a great experience, into a successful experience. And yes, I'm calling it successful because I do believe it's successful. I've done 150 episodes. Most podcasts probably die after 10 to 15, right?
Yeah.
If I can do this, what's stopping you? I really want people to look at it that way. But some random guy from upstate New York I live in Raleigh now, but some random guy just wanted to make a dream happen. Didn't know what the hell I was even doing. Like freaking the beginning of this, I don't know if you'll hear this, for the beginning of this episode, I'm a microphone too far. The mistakes I made along the way, you got to have some self-forgiveness. But if I can do this, anybody can do this. Trust me, go after your goals. Just say yes, take advantage of opportunities. I want to be that influence on people. I want to be honest. I want to be raw. I want to be real, like our conversation that we had, because that's what people are going to connect to. I just want people to pursue what they want to do. And you can tell I'm starting to get passionate here, because there's nothing that makes me happier when someone says, I want to try this, or I want to do this, and they do it. So many people find a reason to say, yeah, I think I might do that. That sounds cool, right? And then you follow up in a couple months. Hey, how's that going? Oh, I haven't started yet. Man, the amount of frustration I get sometimes when I have those conversations, there is nothing that makes me happier knowing that someone says, I'm going to do something. And the next time you follow up in 2 months, you're like, yeah, I'm doing it. It's awesome. It's a good time. Like, hell yeah, man. You are what it's about. I absolutely love hearing that. And I want to influence people to do the same.
Amazing. Ryan, you are such a leader, and you're
Thank you.
an incredibly passionate, purpose-driven person. And it's amazing to get to connect with you. And of course, for folks out there, head on over, Pursuit of Happiness, hit subscribe, check out the archives as well as all the upcoming ones, as I'm going to totally check out that one, your message to your son. I think that's going to be an amazing episode. And if you want to find Ryan, you can go to IamRyanMcGuire.com. I've dropped it in the podcast notes. I've dropped his LinkedIn and his Instagram in the podcast notes as well. And then, of course, on the show. Ryan, is there anywhere else you want folks to find you?
Yeah, no, not necessarily. I would say just at the Pursuit of Happiness podcast on Instagram is worth a follow for sure. Definitely subscribe. I've had people describe my podcast as like a deck of cards. You never know what you're going to get dealt, which I see it as a big positive, right? A lot of people just deal with a specific community. Like I said, the Pursuit of Happiness involves so many things. Every conversation is enlightening. You will be able to take away nuggets from people who are pursuing their happiness, to give you the roadmap how. I don't want you to leave these conversations saying, I wish I had more details. How do they do that? I ask these questions. That's why I started my own podcast, because I really wanted to know. And if you don't know the details, reach out to me. And if you have an idea of more episodes that would make you happy, I'm willing to listen. Let's do it. Let's talk about it. But I know it's a long-winded answer. We can land the plane here. But yeah, follow me at the Pursuit of Happiness podcast on Instagram. Would love to hear from you.
Amazing. And just as Ryan mentioned legacy, also, we've just launched the Legacy League community. And Ryan, for you, if you want to dig into what your legacy could be, we actually have a free course that's it's free for 2 months. But there is an intro course at the beginning of that Legacy League community, which gives you 3 of our tools on how you can dig into your legacy. And then, of course, behind the gates, there's other elite leaders. There's a bunch of new content each week. There's all the archives of years of content that we've created. And then also you get to interact with folks like me, like Susan, our other elite coaches. And so definitely check that out, elitehighperformance.com/legacy league. And your first 2 months are free.
Do it, people.
Yeah.
Do it. My conversation with Rob, not to promote my own podcast, but you got to listen to my conversation with Rob, because that definitely led me to wanting to work with you more. I need to sign up for that, and I will do that. Rob, you've been through it all. I want to just give you some props and shout out for that. I have a genuine appreciation for what you're doing. Awesome podcast, awesome material. You lived it. You've gone through it. There's nobody that I would rather coach me and give me advice than you, than somebody that's actually done it. You've rose from the ashes, literally. So people take advantage of this. Like I said, say yes, right? Say yes. This is a great opportunity. So just say yes.
Amazing. Ryan, you're unbelievable. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.